We are experiencing technical difficulties. Please stand by.
This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Hello there, Place to Be Nation. Welcome back to the Hard-Traveling Fanboys. I'm Outback Greg Phillips, joined as always by my best mate Nick Duke. Nick, how are you?
I thought we had put this voice to rest. I thought we had moved on past it and we weren't going to come back to it, but clearly I was wrong. You've been stopped in the airport by enough Kiwis, which is what they call people from New Zealand, asking for the voice to return, clearly. Also
the name of a great fruit that sponsors the Hard-Traveling Fanboys.
Just kiwis in general, not like a particular brand of kiwi, just the idea of kiwis sponsor us?
So some might say it's an abstract concept, quite frankly.
Australian Jim Ross is always good.
Quite frankly, Outback Jack's the only wrestler that matters. Anyway, welcome everyone to another rousing edition.
Yes, that's right. You probably just heard it. Greg Phillips literally clapped as he said, welcome everyone.
That's right. Welcome to our humble studios in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. We are back from our walkabout over the past week, and we are here to continue Walking Dead month here at the Hard-Traveling Fanboys. We hope that you've enjoyed our first two installments of Walking Dead month. We looked back at the premiere episode of the Walking Dead television show, Days Gone By. We also had Jennifer Smith on from Geek and Sassy to talk about our favorite Walking Dead characters. Today we're here to talk to you about the book. The influential comic book, The Walking Dead. We are going to be looking at the very first trade volume, the first collected volume, which is also called Days Gone By. And this is what started it all. Now, a confession. We were originally going to review the entire book one of The Walking Dead Compendium. Did not have time to finish the entire book, so we're going with just the issues that comprise the first trade volume. But really looking forward to getting into that.
Right. Collectively, Greg Phillips and I both, neither one of us had time to finish book one. That's what Greg's driving at.
That's exactly right.
It's not as if it's entirely the fault of one of us or the other. But, quite frankly, that's not for me to say.
Well, quite frankly, some of us have jobs that require us to work incredible amounts of hours at times.
Well, quite frankly, when you have a cushy government job, you should be forced to work plenty of hours since you're never working hard.
That's neither here nor there. So let's move aside from Nick's personal pot shots and get on to the meat of the matter, something that Nick understands very well, as do I, in fact. Both of us enjoy the meat factories, if you will. So, we have some things in common with Odin Kincannon. That's all I'm saying, Nick.
Now, wait just a minute. I've never done such a thing.
That's not what I heard.
Who told you that?
People at the airport. Where do you think I hear everything, Nick?
The damn people at the damn airport.
Every day I go to the airport.
What airport?
I hear people.
What airport?
I'm Richmond Jackson Vernon Airport in Newcastle.
Richmond Vernon, what a pull! Oh man, woo! We have gone off the rails here. Sir.
Yes, so they tell me at the airport all kinds of things. But what I'm trying to drive at here is we've got that later in the show, that look at The Walking Dead. But what we've got before that is a segment of the show, rather, that you're all very familiar with. Everybody loves it. Everybody listens to it. All few of you that listen, you listen to it and you love it. But we've got something brand new for you this week to introduce it. This has been in the works for what, Nick? 3-4 months now we've been trying to get this done?
Well, let's see, this is episode 27 or 28 of the show, so we've been going for over 6 months, over half a year.
And we've been trying to make it work. We've been trying to get a jingle. That's right, a jingle. And thanks to one of our loyal listeners out there, we now have a jingle. So, ladies and gentlemen, get ready for the opening segment of the Hard-Traveling Fanboys.
Read on and watching out. What you been reading and watching? What you been reading and watching?
And there you hear it, folks. The jingle, the new jingle for what you're reading, what you're watching. What do you think, Nick?
I think it just shows an amazing amount of talent on the part of that individual who put it together, and he can just add it to his audition tape for whenever Supergirl inevitably recasts the character of the one true Jimmy Olsen.
The one true Jimmy, not James Olsen. But that's another story for a little bit later in the show. Now, as mentioned, we do have a segment here, reading and watching. As usual, we kick off with what you're reading, but this is going to be a pretty simple and pretty monotonous and, dare I say it, pretty boring and bland way to start the show, because I haven't actually had time to read anything this week except The Walking Dead. So I haven't read a single comic book in the last week. I've been slam-packed with work and other responsibilities, and have not had an opportunity to read a single issue comic in the past week. So I turn it over to you, Nick. Take over the show and tell us what you've been reading.
I find your preparation for each week to be inspiring, quite frankly. It's a model I should seek to emulate.
It's almost as inspiring as your fantasy football performances lately.
Oh, here we go. We're going to go ahead and get into that?
No, that's later. I'm gonna hold off on that one.
Because it's so entertaining to the audience, we have to mention it twice.
That's right.
I'm going to flip things up a little bit this week and go with my bottom book first, just because I don't have much to say about it, and I want to move on from it. Bottom book of the week, Detective Comics number 942, the finale of Night of the Monster Men. So glad this event is over. I will say this issue was probably the best of the 6, but that's not saying much. I'm just glad this is finally at an end, and we can get back to good Batman comics, which we have had for the most part since Rebirth started. So, Batman Detective Comics 942 is my bottom book of the week.
Oh, and speaking of which, I'll chime in here and say I actually may be picking up Batman again because of the December solicits, which have promised me... January solicits, like I said, which have promised me the Bruce and Selina romance that I mean, they're teasing me with it. They probably won't deliver on it. They never do because they're cowards. And by they, I mean the people that write Batman comics. But they're teasing me with the Bruce-Selina relationship, and I'm taking the bait. And I'm probably going to put that back on my pull list and have to drop something else off. So
yes, they're teasing you with it through a solicit, which always is a good representation of what the comic is actually about, right?
Of course. The comic book companies have never been deceptive in their solicitations, in my opinion.
In your opinion. Well, we'll see how that turns out for you. If that's the only reason you're getting the book back, I am assuming you're going to be very disappointed.
Well, and they're bringing in
January
Bane.
rolls out.
They're bringing in Bane, and I like Bane a lot, so.
Yeah, well, Bane, I think, is the next issue, actually, if I'm not mistaken. In any event, my number 3 book of the week. Again, moving on to my top books of the week. Greg, last week we had a little discussion here about your penny-pinching ways and how they would come back to bite you. And we have started to see, in my opinion, that the proof is in the doll/pudding when it comes to that. Because my number 3 book of the week is All-Star Batman number 3. A very, very good issue. Examines the Bruce and Harvey dynamic from a different perspective than I've ever seen before. Adds a new layer to that relationship that I'm very interested in. Brings back a character from the 90s that we had long thought dead, that I think you in particular will be very happy to see returning. just an all-around, very, very good Batman book. And the backup featuring Duke Thomas, as it has been, continues to impress. So, All-Star Batman number 3. Big fan of this one, and, higher on this series than I've been at any point since it started. And very much intrigued by where it's going, and can't wait to see how it wraps up.
Let me ask you this. Is it still $4.99 an issue?
It is still $4.99 an issue.
I'll buy the trade.
All right, fair enough. That's quite frankly, that's your opinion, just like you bought John Cena and Shawn Michaels on DVD after the fact. But that's neither here nor there. In any event, my number 2 book of the week is Old Man Logan number 12. Every time this book has an issue, it pretty much finds its way onto my top 3, and with good reason. I think it's the best. I think the art is the best in comics right now. Andrea Sorrentino continues to amaze in each and every issue. And this one, while the last run storyline has been a little bit kind of a notch below the first 2 storylines for me, this was by far the best issue of this storyline so far, because it delved more into the emotional weight that Wolverine was carrying around when he first met his wife. Because this is one that takes place in 2 different time periods. It flashes back, it's kind of a flashback and a flash forward simultaneously. So it's a future version of Wolverine who has traveled back to present day, but the flashbacks are flashbacks for him because they look back into his past, which is in our future, if that makes sense.
And I've gone cross-eyed.
That's what I figured you'd say. In any event, no, the flashbacks in this one were outstanding. Some really, really emotional stuff for Logan. I can't wait for you to read this one day. I think you're absolutely going to love it. And
I have little doubt about that.
Not to tell tales out of school, but coming up in March of 2017, you will actually be reading some Old Man Logan for the purposes of this podcast. So, there you are. But yeah, Old Man Logan number 12 takes home my number 2 book of the week. And then my number 1 book of the week, one that it was bittersweet to read because I'm so sad to see this series come to an end. We got the oversized finale to Darth Vader with Darth Vader 25 by Kieran Gillen, and it was, in a word, glorious. Outstanding from beginning to end. Loved everything about it. It's split up into 3 different tales, 3 different stories. Kind of a standard length wrap up to the story that's been going on for a while in the book, kind of putting a bow on everything. Then another story that kind of sets up what the new Star Wars ongoing title, Dr. Aphra, is going to be about. And then finally, one of my favorite things that I've read in a long time. It has a 6-page third story that is entirely art driven. There is no dialogue whatsoever in the entire 6 pages, and they tell the entire story through images alone, and they do an outstanding job of it. So, loved this book, loved the emotional beats for each character who had been heavily involved over the course of the series. Loved getting to see Dr. Aphra and the murder droids going off on their own adventures at the end of this. Just loved everything about it. I think Darth Vader goes down as one of the best Star Wars comics of all time. Now, I say that having not read a ton of Star Wars comics, but it's easily the best Star Wars series I've ever read, and can't wait for you to get your hands on this one, which, speaking of which, you'll also be reading for the purposes of this podcast at a date in the near future.
Evidently, Nick's just picking out all of our Longbook Hunters selections because of the convenience of the wonderful Marvel Unlimited app, which you too can have for the price of
$9.99 monthly or $59.99 annually.
$9.99.
Oh God. No, Nick is picking out our Longbook Hunter selections because I'm seeking out a synergistic approach to podcasting.
You're trying to build a stronger infrastructure within the Hard-Traveling Fanboys network.
That's right. Our podcasts, our Longbook Hunts, are being lined up with major Hollywood theatrical releases in the coming months, so that's part of the reason for it.
Right. Let me ask you this, though. You talked about how much you enjoyed the Darth Vader book. At any point during the book, does he administer a lethal injection?
No, he does not. No lethal injections.
Oh, good. That's good.
No lethal injections, although one is threatened at one point, but I don't believe it was Darth Vader who was going to administer it. But anyway, and then just a few quick hits before we move on. Wonder Woman number 8, an outstanding single issue, a standalone issue that continues to do a fantastic job of making me care about the character of the cheetah more than I ever could have imagined coming into the series. Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps #6 just missed my top 3. I thought this was the best issue of this series thus far. I thought everything about it was great. It was the first issue in which Hal, John, Guy, and Sinestro were all heavily featured, and all had major roles, so I loved everything about this.
Awesome.
Action Comics 965 continues to take a little bit slower approach than the opening storyline would have us get accustomed to, but I will say I found this one more intriguing, and I think you'll enjoy it because it's an entirely Lois Lane focused issue.
Yes, I have heard from a colleague of ours, Mr. Sellers, that I would be a big fan of this issue because I don't think anybody writes Lois quite like Dan Jurgens does. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Absolutely. And then finally, Batgirl and the Birds of Prey #3. I continue to enjoy this series very much from a writing standpoint. The art is still a little wonky for me, but the writing has been so good. The characterizations have been so strong. In particular here, the Black Canary flashbacks to her childhood are fantastic stuff. I just really, really wish the art was better. If the art was better, this would be a contender probably for top 3 each and every month. But as it is, it's still a very, very good Batgirl and the Birds of Prey title that DC's got going right now. So those are my quick hits.
Do the women still look like Vanderlei Silva at all?
A little bit, yeah, the nostrils and stuff.
Yeah. Well, fair enough. You win some, you lose some, right? Well, that wraps up what you've been reading. Let's move on to something that I can participate on, what you watching? And both Nick and I have been watching some superhero television in the last week, fair to say, and that includes the premiere episodes on the CW network of Supergirl and Legends of Tomorrow, and the second episodes of The Flash and Arrow. So, where should we begin? Should we take it night by night, Nick, or should we do the premieres first and then move on to the second episodes?
I'm not really sure. I did talk about Supergirl a little bit last week, so perhaps we should, finish that off, that discussion.
Oh, yes. That's right, I forgot. So the premiere of Supergirl took place last Monday night. I finally watched it over the weekend, and this was the premiere of the CW version of Superman, as people might have seen or heard on our show last week, and played by Tyler Hoechlin.
I think it's Hecklin, but don't hold me to that pronunciation.
Hecklin? We'll call him Hecklin for now. And it was certainly a much more traditionalist, earnest approach to Superman than we've gotten on the big screen in quite some time, and or on the small screen in quite some time. And just a really, really good take on the character. Supergirl and Superman together, it just makes you want to smile, like they're like as American as apple pie. Supergirl is very much a feel-good show, and whenever they're together, it really is inspirational. I don't think the actor playing Superman is particularly good. I don't think his delivery of lines is great, but I will say this: he looks like Superman, and
Absolutely.
They write him in such a way that I can ignore the issues with his delivery and some of the less than impressive or less than authentic sounding lines because they're written so well. So I can appreciate that. And I thought this was a really good episode. I love the usage of John Corbin, a classic Superman villain, Metallo. I love the use of Lena Luthor, the elimination seemingly of the James Olsen Kara relationship that I don't think many people in the world were interested in season 1, and the kind of shuffling down of that character, which works for me. I thought it was really good. I agree with you, Nick. I thought it was a good episode. Probably, as we'll touch on later, probably my least favorite of the premieres thus far, but still really good. I think all the shows have delivered thus far, and that was a good one.
Absolutely. I touched on it a little bit last week, so intrigued, glad to hear that you enjoyed the Superman portrayal. Maybe not quite as much as I thought you would, but still glad to hear that you enjoyed it. So not much else to say there, so let's move on.
So that brings us to Tuesday night, which gave us the second episode of The Flash. as we see some of the continued ramifications of Barry Allen's actions in the time stream, his manipulation of the time stream. We're starting to see more and more of the dominoes that went into effect. And this is also an episode about Barry kind of facing the facts that he'll never be able to put things back the way they were. Of course, never say never in comic books or comic book television, but for now they're saying there's no way that he can ever put it back. This was an episode that, to me was a good episode, a solid episode, an entertaining episode that could have fallen into being just what I would consider to be a passable episode, except for the usage of Jay Garrick, which I thought stole the episode and gave us a memorable scene between Barry and Jay. Your thoughts, Nick?
I also loved that scene. I thought that was the best scene in the episode. I think I enjoyed the episode a little bit more than you did, but I will say that I do have some concerns about it. It did have a feeling of sameness about it, especially when compared to the season premiere. And also, I would argue that mopey, depressed Cisco is not the character. Yeah, is not the character that we tune in each and every week for. So, but to the show's credit, it did seem like they were already starting to move past that by the end of the episode.
Agreed. And the thing about the Flash is, even when they have what I consider to be a little bit of a misstep, they always seem to redeem themselves, and they seem to get themselves righted very quickly. And this episode in particular had some really good action scenes, some really good Barry. I mean, Barry is just phenomenal. I thought he had my favorite line of the episode. I don't even remember what the line was, but just his delivery of it when he's fighting the rival, and then he sees Dr. Alchemy arrive for the first time, and he's just, instead of being like scared or even angry, he's just like, "Oh, for real? Really? This is going to happen right now? Now there's another bad guy? What's your deal?" I thought that was really good, and just an enjoyable show that's anchored by, just like Supergirl, anchored by one of the most likable lead characters on television.
I agree wholeheartedly. I very much enjoyed the episode, though.
Yep.
Good things going all around, and I'm very intrigued what the Caitlin storyline is going to be like over the course of the next few episodes. So,
right, and that's going to add another layer of guilt to Barry, I would imagine, since it would appear that whatever he's done to change the timeline has not worked out well for her. So,
absolutely.
We'll see, but it moves on to Wednesday night, which of course is the flagship show, I guess you'd say, the original show, Arrow, and
the mothership,
mothership, baby, 6:05 Eastern Time, and that would be, of course, Arrow on Wednesday night, CW Network. This was an episode that continues off the threads of the premiere, showing Oliver Queen trying to balance his dual identity as the mayor of Star City and the masked vigilante, the Green Arrow. And in this episode, he's very much trying to train a new team of characters, some of which we met last season, and one of which we just met for the first time this season, which we'll get to in a minute. And Oliver, basically, at the advice of Felicity, is trying to put together this new team, and he's not doing a great job of
advice. I would call it insistence.
I would not. We'll get into that in just a moment as well. The advice of Felicity is putting this team together and is not doing a great job of coaching them at first, and so they have some issues with the new bad guy in town. Played by Tyrese from The Walking Dead. How's that for synergy? Tyrese is playing this new character, Tobias Church, who is causing a lot of problems in Star City. And there's also another new player who apparently is a much bigger badass than Tobias Church, given how the episode ended. And again, another really strong episode. I think I'm digging the season so far a lot more than you are. It's been my favorite of the shows so far. I'm really digging the return to form, and in particular, thought that the usage of Oliver's dual identities has been a standout in the first two episodes, because I think, again, they got away from that last year, and he almost felt like a non-factor in his own show at times. and they've recentered this as clearly being his show. Also enjoyed seeing Diggle again. Hopefully he'll be back, stateside soon and will take over as the leader of this team probably. So let's see where this is all going.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that everything that directly involves Oliver has been very, very good thus far. My concern is more with the other characters that are not Oliver to this point. Specifically, let's go ahead and talk about Felicity a little bit.
Yes, because we vehemently disagree on this one.
Yes, we do. While I agree they've done a good enough job of injecting humor back into her character, I would argue that they've also made a large portion of her character just disagree with whatever Oliver says. If Oliver says the sky is blue, call it green. If Oliver says he's going to go left, tell him he should go right. Just disagree with Oliver at every turn, no matter what. That's her character this season thus far.
If I can throw a little bit of your ammunition back at you, yet you spent last week defending Karen Page, who literally does that in every episode of Daredevil.
I haven't finished Daredevil yet, Greg. You have to remember, I only have the knowledge of the first 6 episodes? 7? I don't remember. One of those. So,
and listen, it's. I would say that Oliver needs somebody like Felicity in his life to tell him, hey, to call him out on his BS. Basically, she's always done that. That's kind of always been, especially with Diggle gone. There's nobody else on the show to do that.
Right, but then we get down into the plot, the subplot of her, insisting that he needs to train a new team, down to the details of her keeping files on all the prospective team members. So she essentially picks the team, insists that Oliver form a new team, insists that Oliver train a new team, and then when it comes time for Oliver to train the team that she's been begging for him to form and train, she has an issue with how he's forming and training the team. Well, she swoops in like an overprotective parent and says, "Oh, Oliver, stop being so hard on them." Every time Oliver does anything, she's there to coddle them and say, "Oh, don't take it so personally." Oliver is trying to whip them into shape. He doesn't need Felicity. He doesn't need Mama Felicity swooping in every 5 minutes to
He's trying to
coddle
whip them into shape by using the tactics of the Russian mafia.
Yes, that worked for him, Greg. Quite frankly.
Quite frankly, I'd suggest that perhaps Oliver wouldn't want them to turn out like him.
Quite frankly, I would suggest that the team thus far that we have come to know and love.
Now, this is what we'll agree on. Yeah. So
over the course of the first few seasons, have been trained by, respectively, the Russian Mafia, the American Special Forces, the League of Assassins, and Malcolm Merlyn. So, don't you think a little bit of a harder edge is required to get the job done?
Absolutely, and
if there's anyone who really should be a trusted expert on the topic of training vigilantes, it should be Felicity Smoke. You're right; she knows everything there is to know about the vigilante training business.
Listen, Diggle will be back soon, and Diggle.
Yes, I hope so.
Diggle will assume the job of training the team. He'll be the Kilowog, or perhaps, dare I say it, Nick, the Jon Stewart.
Oh, God, here we go. In any event, no, I am ready for Felicity to get over whatever her issue with Oliver is at this point. I mean, they're pretty much they've also ignored any hint of a romantic history between the two characters. So I'm ready for them to put that to bed and move on, because if this is the motivation for Felicity calling Oliver out every time he turns around, I'm ready for that subplot to be over and done with. Also, as far as the new team goes, I'm ready for Wild Dog to meet Prometheus, pretty much.
Yes, I agree with you on that. Wild Dog has not been inspiring, I'll say. I'm loving the show. Wild Dog is the one thing to me that has bothered me so far.
Plus, I mean, look at his attitude towards being on the team and being trained in the first place.
He doesn't want to be on the team, right?
What motivation does Felicity have to protect and coddle him, of all people?
Right.
I can at least understand it when it comes to Curtis or Evelyn Sharp, who I'm pretty sure only got 3 lines in the entire episode, by the way. But, it just doesn't make sense why Felicity would go out of her way to protect Wild Dog, of all people.
Yeah, and Wild Dog just feels like such a generic, I'm young and rebellious and angry kind of character. And also, he doesn't appear to have much of value to offer the team since he's gotten his ass kicked by Oliver 3 times now. So, it's... I don't know. I'm ready for maybe Vigilante will be better. I will say this: I thought Ragman was really good on the episode.
Yeah, Ragman was good so far, and his backstory will have a pretty cool tie to some events from last season that directly involve Felicity. So perhaps it will give her a more interesting and less annoying character arc to go through over the next few episodes.
Indeed. Also, it's a lot more natural to build a team like that where Oliver encounters these people in the field and sees what they can do and what they could bring to a team, whereas he didn't really see any inherent value in Wild Dog. So, I think that's a good point. But I think we've belabored that enough. Both of us are enjoying the show, so hopefully it will continue its string of good episodes going forward. Moving on to Thursday is an episode I know we both enjoyed phenomenally well. Legends of Tomorrow's Season 2 premiere. This took place kind of all over the time frame, actually. All over the timeline, I should say. We get the members of the team scattered throughout time. We get a guest shot from the guy we were just talking about, Mayor Oliver Queen, who is encountered by a historian who is tracking the legends throughout the time stream. Just a tremendous... Again, I hate this word. I really do, because it doesn't really mean anything. I'll just use it in this context. This was a tremendously fun episode, in that I had a lot of fun watching it. Like, I was just constantly finding something new to enjoy, something new to laugh about, something new to get invested in. This show is just, to me, firing on all cylinders right now, and I think it... For me, Arrow was probably the best premiere, but this is right neck and neck with it as the best premiere episode of the CW shows. I thought it was excellent.
I would say it's right neck and neck with The Flash for the best of the season premieres, but I loved it as well. Seemed to give every character a great moment. Did a good job of endearing you pretty much immediately to the new character of Dr. Nate Haywood, who I believe is going to have some kind of tie to Commander Steele of the JSA, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, and also the closing shot of the episode when the Justice Society showed up, that was pretty awesome stuff. Yeah,
that was a really good reveal. The double reveal of the Justice Society, and then right before that, the reveal that the Reverse Flash is working with Damien Dark, which we knew if you'd followed the previews of the season and everything. But for people that hadn't followed that, or even for me to see it, just to see the cool reveal, because the guy who plays Damien Dark, what's his name? I can't remember, but he's awesome.
Neil McDonough.
Neil McDonough, yep. He's a great actor, and so he played the scene to perfection, and I'm really excited to see what the Reverse Flash could want from Damien Dark and how they benefit each other. But then, of course, the JSA reveal, Stargirl, and everything else there was just right up my alley. So big fan of this, excited to see where it's going, and hoping for a little bit more of that Sarah Lance.
From what I understand, according to an interview with Kreisberg and the various producers, apparently Sarah will develop a little crush on Supergirl in the crossover.
Should we go to break yet, or?
No, we got more. We got more to handle.
Well, anyway, yeah, we're really enjoying Legends of Tomorrow. Let's put it like that. And anything else to add on that, Nick, before we move on to the rundown?
I don't believe so. Just real quick, just for entertainment value, your episode of the week.
My episode of the week, I am going with Legends of Tomorrow premiere episode.
As am I. Yeah, we agree on that.
So let's move on to the rundown. Now, we don't have a fancy jingle for this, nor do we have a Tom song yet. And we've got just a few items to run down for you here. I don't think there's anything incredibly meaty to get into that will take up a lot of discussion time, but we just got kind of a few big news items in the comic book world. We'll start off with 2 new solo X-Men titles coming up from Marvel as part of the Resurrection event movement. I don't really know.
I think it's kind of just a
branding,
a banner, a branding. Much like the Initiative was a brand, a banner that they put across the top of their titles. Much like Rebirth is for DC, something like that.
Yeah, so anyway, as part of this resurrection, whatever it represents, perhaps an attempt to resurrect the X-Men brand after what's been perceived as a downtime in the X universe, we have got a brand new Weapon X series coming out. Coming in spring 2017. Marvel recently announced this. Don't know a lot of details about it yet. We don't know who or what it will focus on, but for those of you who don't know, Weapon X is the program that basically it was actually what Wolverine was known as. He's part of this government program that takes mutants in or people and experiments with them and tries to turn them into living weapons that the government can control, or that these seedy agencies can control. And so, it remains to be seen if this will be a Wolverine book, if this will be at all related to Logan, if it'll be about Deadpool, who's been in the program. We really don't know who or what this is about yet, but it's coming. And also, we're getting an Iceman solo title, of all things. One of the original X-Men, Iceman, is getting his own ongoing. And again, we don't know much about it. We don't know if this is going to be the time-displaced young Bobby Drake or the current older but still not that old Bobby Drake. We really don't know which of these Icemen will be in the title, or perhaps both.
And the bigger question is, if both are featured, how will that affect their 2017 Fantasy Comics Draft eligibility status?
Ooh, we would have to consult a bottle of Jack Daniels to find that out, I think. I don't know which of the Ice people will be in it, and I know he's a popular character. He's never had a solo ongoing series, and honestly, I'm not sure there's an audience for it, but we'll see, I guess.
I think there is an audience, especially if they use the younger version of the character. That version of the character was revealed to be gay, and I think so they could use that as a means of increasing diversity across the line, and maybe try to reach
that's a good point. Yeah.
That particular community with the title. I'm not sure that's the route they'll go, but it could be. On the Weapon X front, I think you could see this as a means to either reintroduce the present day version of Wolverine, or to go with a team of Weapon X themed characters. Like that teaser image that was put up has Deadpool, Wolverine himself, X-23, I believe a character that looks like Sabretooth as well, all on there. So maybe it'll wind up being some sort of team book. I'm not really sure. But either way, I think the overall the story here really is, it seems as if Marvel is preparing a renewed focus on the X universe after months, and some would say years, of trying to de-emphasize those characters. So I think it bodes well for whatever this resurrection story winds up being for those people who are feeling as if the X-Men have been shunted off to the side in recent months.
Yes. And again, I will echo the thoughts of another PTB and Pop contributor, Kelly Poole, who recently tweeted out that he would like the Scarlet Witch to come out and say just one time, "No more Inhumans." So hopefully that will happen as a result of this event.
You people and your hatred of the Inhumans.
The hatred is strong, Nick. The hatred is strong.
Embrace the hate.
Now, moving on to the DC side of things, we also got a blockbuster announcement from one of the top creators in DC, probably the top writer at DC right now. Scott Snyder made an announcement about his blockbuster team with Greg Capullo, the creative team that has been behind Batman for the last, 5 years, and currently taking a break from each other as Capullo works with Mark Miller on a project. But they're going to reunite in the summer of 2017 for the next big DC Comics event right after Justice League vs. Suicide Squad. No title for this event, no information about this event, but all he said is that it's a DC Comics event and that it is heavily Batman focused. So the natural assumption would be that this is going to tie into DC Universe Rebirth and Batman's quest to find out the secret behind the mystery that's driving this event.
Yeah, that's certainly the way it would seem. I don't know that it comes directly after Justice League versus Suicide Squad the way you said. I believe that event will be wrapping up more in the winter/early spring time frame, and this will be, a summer event. So I think we'll have a few months in between this.
Right. No, I didn't mean it like that. I just meant that it's the next big event after that. So
right. Yeah, maybe the next big in the series of quarterly events that DC is preparing to release that you and I are both skeptical,
somewhat weary of.
Yes. But anyway, no, Snyder and Capullo coming back together to do a story, especially if it does wind up tying into the larger Rebirth narrative. I am very excited about that. I mean, not really much else to say here. I can't wait to see what this is, and if it is the final time these two team for the character, then obviously I'll be there. I'll be there with bells on, but hopefully this is not the last time we'll see these two working on a Batman title together.
Absolutely. And speaking of Batman, wanted to throw this one in as well. Joe Manganiello, who is playing Deathstroke in the new movie The Batman by Ben Affleck, says that the movie is going to be filming a lot sooner than any of us thought. According to him, it will start filming this coming spring, which would certainly be a much shorter time frame than most of us expected. Right. So, what do you think about that, Nick?
Well, it would certainly seem to indicate that the movie will be coming sooner than any of us thought. If they're filming in spring of 2017, you would have to think a summer or fall of 2018 release is probably likely. I mean, wouldn't it seem that way? Yeah.
That's what it's trending towards right now. And hey, I'm cool with that. I'm interested. I'm very excited about this project. Affleck's a great director, and of course he's working on the script with our boy Jeff Johns. So hopefully they'll come up with something awesome, and we'll be there to watch it, of course, on opening night, as always with Batman movies.
Absolutely. But speaking of things, you hope that it's awesome. Let's talk about something that isn't awesome, Greg. Let's talk about one of our least favorite things in all the DCCW universe, and that, of course, is James, not Jimmy, Olsen. Greg, why don't you tell the people what's going on with Mr. Olsen these days?
Well, Mr. James Olsen, the shall we say, more buff, handsome, popular, intelligent, cool, generally loved by those around him version of the traditionally nerdy, down on his luck, self-conscious, neurotic young Jimmy Olsen, James Olsen. This version of him is apparently going to become the DC Comics superhero known as the Guardian, created in 1942 by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby as let's face it, as the DC version of Captain America, and he will be playing the Guardian character, and he's not in my opinion a very accurate portrayal of Jimmy Olsen, and becoming the Guardian is not going to help that, in my opinion, to get him closer to my preferred take on Jimmy Olsen. And also, the costume they've got for him, if it's accurate from what we've seen in the images, appears to be a white costume of some kind. And there's the Guardian, for those who don't know, is a gold and blue clad hero. There appears to be no reason not to have the costume be gold and blue. So, just all around, big, gigantic meh from me on this news, Nick. What's your reaction to James Olsen becoming the Guardian?
Well, my biggest reaction is that it unfortunately means he will continue to play a major role in the show, which was something I was hoping would no longer be the case. And this costume, like you said, is awful. Perhaps this is just the first incarnation of the costume. Perhaps it will get better as time goes on.
They have time to improve it, yeah, no doubt.
But it looks pretty terrible right now. I don't know much about Guardian. I know he was featured in some early episodes of Young Justice, and other than that, I haven't read a ton.
He was a big part of the Superman books in the early 90s. He was part of Project Cadmus, actually, in the early 90s. And, he's a character that goes back decades. I primarily know him from the 90s run. And he, and this is probably going to be a different take on the character anyway, of course, but the Guardian there was like a Cadmus sponsored superhero, essentially. Although he was a good guy, he didn't understand all the bad stuff that Cadmus was doing. He eventually turned against them and was an ally of Superman during that time. So definitely a character that's steeped in DC mythology, and does have some connection to Jimmy Olsen, because in the 70s when Jack Kirby was writing the Fourth World stuff, he had the what was it? Jimmy Olsen and the Newsboy Legion, I believe. They were protected by the Guardian in their investigations of Intergang and stuff like that. So, there is some tie there, but having James be him just continues to drive away the point that I don't think I'd have as big a problem with this guy if he was not playing Jimmy Olsen.
If he were named anything else.
Right. I don't think he's a great actor, but, he's okay. He's passable. But it's just he's playing a character that is frustratingly unlike the character that he is adapting from the small screen, which is not really his fault. It's the fault of the writers. But, he
plays a character. He is on the show for seemingly no other purpose than to be featured periodically on Geek and Sassy's nerd eye candy of the moment.
And he will probably continue to be featured on that as long as he's featured on the show.
That's fine. It's just, quite frankly, I would suggest he has nothing to do with Jimmy Olsen. But
you know who does? The character of Wynn.
The character of Wynn, who should just be... They should find a way to reveal that he is the Jimmy Olsen of, Earth 27 or something, who has been brought to this Earth and is actually Jimmy Olsen. Because he, in the first 2 episodes of the show, which we didn't talk about episode 2 of Supergirl earlier because Greg hasn't seen it yet, but I have, and I'm telling you, over the first 2 episodes of this season of Supergirl, Wynn Schott acts more like Jimmy Olsen in 2 episodes than James Olsen has done in 22 episodes so far. So, yeah, very frustrated with that character still.
Also unlikely to appear on the Geek Eye Candy chart, Nick or I. So we'll leave that to Mr. Guy that plays that character, who I won't call Jimmy Olsen. And other than that, we've only got one more little news item, and neither of us has much to offer on this because we don't know a whole lot about it. But it's pretty cool nonetheless. Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips, their property Incognito, a series that they worked on in the past, it's long ago been optioned for a film at Sony. Well, it's finally found a writer and a director, a screenwriter and a director. It looks like the director of the movie Don't Breathe, which got good reviews, called, I can't pronounce his first name, Alvarez is his last name, and 10 Cloverfield Lane screenwriter Daniel Casey are working on this adaptation of Incognito. It was done as part of Marvel's Icon Comics imprint, Nick, kind of their version of Vertigo. So this is really cool. Always excited to see creator-owned properties, creator-driven properties get optioned for films. So really excited about this. I don't know what it's about. I don't know the premise of it, but I will definitely support this. Hopefully it'll come out and give us another quality comic book film to look at, perhaps in an off-the-page down the line. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, we don't really know much about it. I just think it's another great example of indie comics continue to be, ripe fodder for big screen or small screen adaptations. It seems to be that's where Hollywood is going these days. Whenever they want, a potential property, they're snapping up every independent comic they can get their hands on. This is just another great example. And this one should be good. I mean, Ed Brubaker's work almost at times seems like it would lend itself better to film than it does to comics. So very excited about this, even though I know nothing about it.
Yep, absolutely. And with all that being said, we're driving down the home stretch here. We're going to go to a commercial break, and when we come back on the other side, The Walking Dead, the influential comic book by Robert Kirkman, Tony Moore, Charlie Adlard. We will be getting into all that and talking about our thoughts on the first volume. Be sure to listen to all the commercials here and go and listen to some of the great podcasts here on PTBN Pop. We've got Seller's Points, which you can catch every couple weeks. We've got Geek and Sassy, who are churning out episodes every couple weeks. They're killing it. Lucha Undead continues to deliver. The Glenn Butler Podcast Hour Spectacular. We're giving you plenty of content here at Place to Be Nation Pop. Everybody's doing great work, and be sure to tune in to all of our great friends here. We're going to be cross-pollinating over the next couple months quite a few times, so you'll hear all of us on each other's shows, so that should be fun. Anyway, catch you on the other side.
Read on and watch out. What you been reading and watching? What you been reading and watching?
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Voice of Ring of Honor's Kevin Kelly here. I want to make sure you're subscribed to all of our great feeds here at Place to Be Nation. Just head to iTunes today and search and subscribe to the Place to Be podcast feed, the PWO PTBN feed, PTBN Pop, and of course the Kevin Kelly Show feed, which includes the full archives of my podcast. Some really great stuff. Subscribe, listen, and then rate us and leave feedback today. Thanks for being a fan of professional wrestling. More importantly, thanks for being a fan and supporter of the Place to Be Nation.
Place to Be Nation's JT Rosero here. In addition to the archives of the Kevin Kelly Show, we have a ton of great podcasts available to you on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and PlaceToBeNation.com. And we now offer them to you on two great feeds. On the Place to Be podcast feed, you can check out Scott Criscolo and me on the Mothership, the Place to Be podcast, with our famous Vintage Vault pay-per-view reviews. PTBN also covers current day wrestling with clotheslines and headlines, main event, Mission Indie Possible, in our monthly pay-per-view reaction shows with immediate feedback on WWE, NXT, and Ring of Honor Super shows. Relive wrestling's past with our monthly pay-per-view rewind series led by Ben Morse, and the Dangerous Alliance Wrestling podcast as we dive into various subjects in the form of exercises and games. All of this in addition to Scott Keith's Podcast of Doom, which includes discussions on questions from listeners, as well as current day and old school wrestling. We also have sports covered too with the Sports Lounge, the TJ McClune Show, and NBA Team Podcast. On our brand new PTB Pop podcast feed, we offer great shows such as the Glenn Butler Podcast Hour Spectacular, Rank and File, Lucha Undead, as well as a veritable podcast heaven for comics fans with the Hard-Traveling Fanboys, Seller's Points, Todd Weber's Conversation, and Imaginary Stories. Subscribe to both feeds on iTunes and be sure to rate and leave feedback as well. All of these shows are available on PlayStation.com, where we cover pro wrestling, sports, movies, comics, plus tournaments and more. Be sure to check out on the right-hand side of the site for details on how to support the site when you shop at Amazon and download our free Place to Be Vintage Vault Refresh ebooks. We also want to thank our friends at Bonehead's Wing Bar in West Warwick, Rhode Island, and Fall River, Massachusetts, and Scott Keith's Blog of Doom. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr as well. PlaceToBeNation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
This is Parv, and I'm here to tell you to listen and subscribe to the Pro Wrestling Only Place to Be Nation podcast network. That's the PWO PTBN podcast network, where you'll find a ton of in-depth shows done by hardcore fans. We've got Chris Zellner's 1-2 punch of Exile on Bad Street, and with David Bickenspan, a smash hit Between the Sheets. We've got Wrestling Culture with Dylan Hales and Dave Musgrave, Goodwill Wrestling and the reaction shows with Good Old Will from Texas. We got This Week in Wrestling with my man Pete and Johnny Sorrow, Stephen Graham and Tim Livingston's Pro Wrestling Super Show, Tag Teams Back Again with Kelly and Marty Sleaze, and a ton of other great shows too. And of course there's Titans of Wrestling and Where the Big Boys Play with yours truly and some dude from down south called Chad. PWO PTBN Podcast Network.
Greats come alive, the water's on fire. I've been in this place before. Yeah, we dance through the night as the flames burn bright and the pages passed out on the floor. What's so new about what you're saying? It's a new generation with the same sad song. What's so new about what you're saying? Just another generation with the same sad song.
Coral!
Couldn't tell us any better.
Coral!
You gotta live to know. Yeah, that's
We're back, ladies and gentlemen. And that sound you heard was Rick Sheriff Rick Grimes on the TV show, Officer Rick Grimes in the comic book, calling out for his son, who is apparently a living coral reef. So,
now, to be fair, in the early seasons, he was still Carl.
That's true. At what point did he morph into coral? Was it when he got the long, shaggy hair?
I think it would have to be at the end of season 2, whenever Rick declares that it's now a Rick-tatorship. That's when things changed.
I hate it when you're forced to live in a Rick-tatorship.
Rick-tatorship. Oh.
Although Rick-tators do sound pretty good to go with a hamburger, maybe. But in any event, we do welcome you to the second half of this episode, where we are going to be taking a longbook hunt, ladies and gentlemen, right here in the Outback. Sorry, I'm not going to bring that back, not yet. But we are taking a longbook hunt, and we're looking at the first collected volume, the first story arc of The Walking Dead, which is known as Days Gone By, the same title as the premiere episode of the hit television series. Now, this comic book series actually predates the television series, of course, by several years. In fact, and I didn't even realize this, the first issue came out in October 2003, which is an eternity ago in comic book land. I mean, the whole shape of the comic book industry was drastically different in 2003 than it is today, and this book actually had a lot to do with changing it. So, and this was obviously, let's start with the creators. Robert Kirkman is the writer, the creator of The Walking Dead. He created it alongside Tony Moore, who is the artist only on this first volume. Apparently, Tony Moore and Robert Kirkman had a fallout at some point after the publication of issue number 6, I guess, and Moore has never worked on The Walking Dead again since then, and Charlie Adlard came in to pencil issue 7 and is still penciling it to this day. The Walking Dead, for those that haven't ever picked up the comic, it is a black and white comic. There's no color at all.
The covers have color. That's the only place you'll find color.
Right. The covers are fully colored, but the interiors are black and white, noir style, very gritty, very bare bones, very it's a black and white comic. I mean, these books tend to be a little bit more on the gritty side, and I think that was an intentional choice on Kirkman's part to get a black and white comic to sort of spell out the grittiness of the world that he was creating. Let's start back with this book, because neither Nick nor I had ever read this comic before the television show. No. I don't believe.
No, I didn't even attempt to read the book until after. Oh, it was either after season 2 or season 3 of the show had aired. It was my first real foray into the comics. So, we should probably, like you're trying to give the people the knowledge up front, but we need to, make sure they understand this. It is impossible for Greg and I to evaluate this comic without the knowledge of the show. We can only evaluate it using the perspective that we have, and the perspectives that we have largely been informed through our enjoyment of the television show.
Exactly. So, we always harp on this in the superhero world. We don't think it's fair to compare the comics to the screen because they're different. They're different media. In this case, it's difficult for us because we're almost going backwards. We're viewing a refined version of these characters versus what they originally began as. So this comic came out in October 2003. I didn't even hear about it until maybe somewhere around 06, 07. I had heard of people on the wrestling blog that I went to who were reading this comic, but I never actually read it. I didn't get bothered to read the first trade. I think Russell might have lent it to me once the series was announced, or maybe even after the premiere episode aired. I don't know. I can't remember. But it was certainly the TV series by Frank Darabont that brought the whole thing the concept to my mind. Nick, what about you? You mentioned between season 2 and 3, you think, is when you started on it. Had you heard of it before? I
had never heard of it until they announced that it was in development at AMC, and that was the first I'd heard of it. And so at the time, I didn't think much of it. I was like, oh, that, whatever. Just must be some little indie book I've never heard of. I had no idea it was as big a deal as it was at that point.
So if you've seen the TV series, particularly if you've seen the pilot episode, you pretty much know the overall premise of this book. The main character is Rick Grimes, who in the comic book different from the TV show. In the comic, he is just an officer, not a sheriff. He lives in Kentucky, in a small town in Kentucky, works as a police officer. He is shot by a criminal who has just recently escaped from a penitentiary, actually. In the TV show, they never actually make it clear, I think, who the criminal is or why he's there that shoots Rick. But essentially, Rick gets shot. He ends up in a coma. When he awakens from the coma, the world has gone to hell, basically. It's a zombie apocalypse. The dead are coming to life and eating the living and turning them into the undead, basically. Nobody's around to help him. His family's gone. His friends are gone. And he's got to make sense of this world around him and figure out what to do, figure out how to find his wife and son in the midst of all of this craziness, assuming they've even survived, which, spoiler alert, they have. So that's pretty much the premise of The Walking Dead. It puts you into this man's shoes, and you follow him as he and his friends and his people he encounters along the way as these human beings try to adapt to the apocalypse, basically. I mean, for all intents and purposes, this is the end of the world. Electronics shut down, communication shut down, transportation shut down. It's almost like going back to the caveman times in many ways. So these people have to survive, and they have to not just survive against the zombie hordes, but survive against themselves, survive against humanity, survive against the elements. So it's a really good premise, I think you would agree, taken off of Kirkman's love of George Romero movies, the classic zombie films of the past, and almost adding a survivalist tint to them. A really good premise, and I think that it probably struck at the right time in pop culture, because there was 28 Days Later and a few other zombie flicks, that Shaun of the Dead, that came out around that time this comic was coming out, but obviously it didn't hit big until the TV show. But this hit at the right time, that there was some movement towards this type of genre, and in addition to that, there was a chance to humanize this and to make it a story that anyone could relate to, which had played, that was the hallmark of Romero's best zombie films, is they're really human films. And this is at least in theory, The Walking Dead is a story about humans, not about zombies. So, was that a decent job of summarizing the premise, Nick? Of the
yes,
book?
I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head in terms of the premise. And I would say that you spend a lot more time setting that up than the book does.
Oh, man, yes. So, let me preface this discussion that Nick and I are about to have.
Greg, here's the thing. Greg cannot say anything that might even potentially be considered controversial without making sure he couches it in like 15 different ways, first of all. Greg Phillips is the anti-Eric Bischoff for our wrestling friends out there.
Quite frankly, that's your opinion. Now, some might say that I don't do that. Some might say I do. That's their opinion. They have a right to their opinion, quite frankly. Some of you might think that we're idiots for even saying this, and maybe we are. Hell, maybe we deserve to be on a certain list from a certain competitor, but that's neither here nor there. But folks, what we're about to do right now is we're going to make some somewhat unique comments about the comic book series The Walking Dead. Now, as I switch back into Greg voice, now, some of these comments are a little unique. Some of these comments are controversial. We come at it from comic book aficionados who've been reading a lot of comics for a lot of years, and we're fans of the show. But before we get into some of the things about this book that might bother us a little bit, let's talk about the overall impact of this book, because what we have today in comics is something of a new golden age in many ways, in terms of there have never been more options available to people to read now. Different genres, different styles, different writers and artists, and different combinations in comics than there are right now. And the comics that don't involve DC or Marvel, Image Comics in particular, is the number one non-DC Marvel publisher, clearly, and they provide us with all kinds of awesome books from Brian K. Vaughan, from Ed Brubaker, from Greg Rucka, from all of these outstanding writers, all these outstanding artists that give us new creative material. But the book that buoys that entire company, the book that buoys that side of the industry, is The Walking Dead. So no matter what we say about it, it is by far the highest selling non-DC, non-Marvel comic book. It is a book and a TV show in particular, but a book that has been sort of the tide that has lifted all other indie titles, and also has ushered in a new era of creator-owned comic books, as we mentioned earlier with Incognito getting optioned by Hollywood studios. Had there been that before The Walking Dead? Absolutely. Road to Perdition, etc., The Crow, and on down the line. But it feels like this is a new era for that, where if you're a comic book creator, you have a damn good chance of getting your property, if it's a good property, turned into a movie now, where that wasn't the case 10, 15, 20 years ago. So we have to give Walking Dead props for that.
Absolutely. I mean, as you mentioned, it's a sales juggernaut still to this day. I mean, most recently, for the month of September, Walking Dead number 158 was the only non-Marvel or DC title to rank in the top 10 sellers of the month. And also, the 26th volume, the 26th trade paperback, was the number one selling graphic novel of the month for September. And every time a new trade is issued, it instantly shoots to the top of the charts. Every time, without fail. So, regardless of what Greg or I may have to say about this first trade here over the rest of the show, that doesn't take away from the overwhelming amount of success that the book has enjoyed and the legions of fans it has created along the way.
Absolutely. Now, let's go a-hunting, Nick. So, again, I laid it out that if you've seen the pilot episode of the TV show, you pretty much know the premise of this book. But with there's several key differences, but the biggest key difference is any sense of transition between scenes, any sense of time to connect to characters, any sense of
patience
in storytelling appears not to exist in this.
Kirkman's goal in this first trade especially seems to be to burn through story as fast as he can possibly get his hands on it.
Yeah, so for instance, the TV series opens with this uneventful scene where Rick and Shane are chatting over a cup of coffee when they get the call to. Yeah, cheeseburger. Sorry, when they get the call to respond to this prisoner who is trying to get away, basically, and it's a small scene. It takes up very little time, but what it does is instantly humanizes this story. It throws you into the shoes of a normal guy and his friend, and they're just two normal dudes sitting around talking about life, uneventful, unimportant stuff, mundane things. Now, in the book, you pick up with Rick in the middle of a firefight. You're not even given Shane's name at first. He's just a nameless officer that's there with Rick. And they're in the middle of a firefight with this escaped prisoner. And Rick gets shot on, I believe it's the first page. Is that correct?
It's the first or second page, yeah.
First page, the bottom panel. In the first page, he gets shot. And the next page, he wakes up from the coma. Yep. I mean, literally, I've heard of comics moving at a breakneck pace, and that's fine in some instances. In a book that is so built upon human drama, it feels like a misstep to me to blow through it to such a degree. And that's an example. Another example would be the character of Morgan, who in the television pilot gets this incredibly rich subplot that we mentioned a few weeks ago, where he's got a wife, and his wife has succumbed to the virus, and he and his son are living alone, and he can't bring himself to shoot his wife and put her out of her misery, so to speak. He just can't bring himself to do it. All of that's missing here. Pretty much, Morgan and his son are the same. They still live together. They still attack Rick, and they still help him out, but they instantly trust him for reasons that aren't made clear. They like him, they trust him, and They bring him into their home and feed him and tell him how great he is, and which becomes a recurring theme of sorts. I noticed in this first volume, there are characters that seem to exist only to tell Rick how great he is.
You're a good man, Rick is probably the most often
you're a good man,
spoken line.
Well, Rick, I guess when you put it like that, Rick, I guess you're right. I guess a good, cool man like you who solves problems, and by the way, you're very handsome, Rick. And I think that you, Rick, are probably the one that needs to make this decision.
Right. You know, what's interesting also is that you mentioned, Morgan and his son find Rick, hit him over the head with a shovel, bring him in, feed him, and trust him and praise him, and then he takes them to the police station. And once again, all of this happens in the course of about 2 pages. It is...
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it right now. He's hitting the head with the shovel. Okay, 1 page, 2 page, 3 page... 4 page, 5 page, 6 page, 7 page, and he says goodbye. And that's it. That's the end of Morgan.
7 pages.
And then we get panels of, and yet we get plenty of panels of Rick's car sitting in the road.
Yes,
which feels like a waste of real estate. Now, and sadly, I would argue that the first issue is probably one of the better ones because there's not much dialogue in it.
Right. That's one thing. The dialogue here is it lacks what we would call subtlety.
Yes. So at times, some people have criticized the show's writing. I would question if those people have ever actually read the Walking Dead comic.
Well, perhaps part of that criticism comes from people who came to the comic first. I mean, just to play devil's advocate, let's say this. Imagine a hypothetical scenario, Greg, in which you and I watched the first season of the television show Preacher without having ever read the book, and then went and read Preacher.
Oh, yeah.
Would we not have the same complaint that the entirety of the first season of Preacher is blown through in essentially 6 pages in the very first issue of the book?
No, that's fair. That's fair. And so what I'm getting out of that, Nick, is that you're telling me that Preacher is about the same quality level as The Walking Dead Days Gone By.
Quite frankly, I did not suggest that. You are placing false inferences into this discussion.
But no, that is a good point, and that is absolutely a fair point. My counter to that would be, my issue is not that the dialogue is not the same as it is on the show, or that characters talk differently than they do on the show. Don't have an issue with that. My issue, or even the characterizations are different from the show. Don't have an issue with that. My issue is that human beings do not talk this way.
And that it attempts to tell a human-focused story, a story that is all about emotional weight. And if you don't give the story any time to breathe, if you don't let things play out in a natural fashion rather than speeding through them, then there is no emotional impact, in my opinion.
Right.
For
ahead.
example, I mean, specifically talking about, so the first 2 issues are built entirely around, Rick trying to find his family, which is a understandable, subplot. It's one that should have been really an entire trade on its own, and yet they blow off Rick being separated from his family and the reunion in 2 issues, essentially.
Right, which, it's hard to even feel excited for him because it's happened so quickly. It's like, it's like, oh, well, I mean, you didn't really, you were awake, you've been awake for how long? I mean, they tell us the passage of time, but they don't show us the passage of time necessarily in this one.
And then also, I mean, like other things that happen just so quickly. So Rick rides into Atlanta on 1 page, and let's see, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages later, he's saved by Glenn, and then is out of the city 4 pages after that. Just nothing has any time to have an emotional impact on the reader.
I mean,
like it is comic book storytelling at warp speed, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's extremely compressed storytelling. Which maybe will work in a superhero comic better than it would work here for me, because these are new characters, not characters I already know about and I have an attachment to. And they're sitting around here and they're talking in expositional is not even the word for it. It's almost like they're narrating to one another what is happening.
Yes, or what has happened off screen or off panel, so to speak.
For instance, I'm reading. Here's an instance. This isn't even one of the. This is not one of the more blatant instances. This is just early on in the book. Rick's talking to Morgan about what's going on, and Morgan has just finished explaining to Rick in great detail what has gone on while he's been in the coma. And Rick says, "My in-laws live in Atlanta. That's only a 5-hour drive from here. That's probably where my wife went. Thank God. If they're protecting the cities, man, I was so worried." Then Morgan says, "Yeah, I'm sure they're fine." And then Rick goes, "Well, I need a car if I'm going to get to Atlanta. Want to go shopping?" He's just said that it's a 5-hour drive, but he has to, again, reiterate, yes, indeed, you have to have a car to drive. So that's kind of an example of the kind of beat you over the head dialogue.
Here's my favorite one. So Rick is reunited with his wife and family. He is introduced to the group that also includes Shane, Glenn, Dale, Andrea's sister, Carol, various other characters who weren't on the show that I've forgotten the name of, to be honest. Anyway, various characters. And rather than
Alan and
Donna and their twin boys, that whole deal. And rather than slowly having Rick be introduced to each character and kind of letting us figure out what the dynamics of the group are, nope, Dale pulls Rick aside to tell him exactly everything that has transpired in the course of 2 panels. And I quote, "I don't want to stir nothing up. And you got to understand this has nothing to do with your wife. She did nothing but talk about you while you were gone. She worried about you. She felt bad about leaving you. But that Shane, he's a good man. He helps out a lot around here. He took care of your wife, but he's not glad you're back. He's had his eye on Lori for as long as I've known them. I appreciate the advice, Dale, but Shane's my friend. He was just keeping her safe. I don't have anything to worry about. I wouldn't trust him around my wife. I'll keep that in mind." And that is essentially telling you the entire character arc that Shane and Rick are about to embark on in literally 4 panels.
Oh my God. That's and there's a lot of that in this. There's a lot of explaining to people how people feel instead of people just feeling it. And the shame of this is the art's tremendous.
Great, yeah.
Tony Moore's art is fantastic.
And I'm not even typically a big fan of black and white comics, but this I really like.
Me either. Yeah, Tony Moore does a great job of expressing whatever the character is feeling, so you don't need that dialogue there. You don't need Rick to tell us that he's angry. You can see that he's angry. You don't need Shane to tell us that he's angry. You can see that he's angry. And the same with this exchange between Rick and Morgan. I'm looking at it again here in the book where Morgan is saying it's worth it just to talk to somebody again, because if it ain't about cartoons or passing gas, my boy don't want to talk about it. And then there's just this shot of Rick smiling, and then he kind of frowns, and you can tell that he's thinking about his own son. But instead, of course, he says, "Damn, after everything I've seen today, I feel guilty for laughing." It's again, you didn't really need to say it. And then of course you get a lot of scenes of people consoling Rick and explaining to Rick in the process of consoling him how great he is, just kind of talking him off the ledge, and all that. And let's see, hang on, I'm getting to this other part that I love here. Oh, the scene where they go into the armory, and Rick is getting a bunch of guns to give to Morgan and Dwayne, his boy, and they're literally in the process of talking. They're explaining the process of killing the zombies, and he says, Dwayne's like, "Can I?" And he says, "No, damn it, don't touch anything." "But I'm old enough." "Yes, you are, and I'm going to teach you how to use one of them tomorrow. But until then, they're off limits." Which that was used in the TV show. And then Rick comes back in and is like, "Are there enough shells for both of us?" We don't even get an answer to that because they just start talking about clothes after that. There's there's a lot of introductions of subplots, or introductions of not subplots, but introductions of little things that are introduced in conversation that are never followed up on. They just move on to the next scene.
Right. Yeah, so the dialogue is bad. The pacing and plotting, I would argue, is pretty bad. So what we're standing on here at this point is a concept and some very good art. So, in your opinion, like, why did this hit so big? How did it get so popular so fast? Because, I mean, even among the indie books I've read, the image books I've read over the last few years, this wouldn't even crack a top 5, in my opinion.
No, no, not even close. Especially when it's a brand that you've come to associate with such high quality. You know, when you read an image book, it typically has better dialogue than the average superhero book, because typically they're written like people talk. I think that this hit. I suspect it hit for 2 main reasons. Number one is the premise. I think that we went through that zombie phase in pop culture, or not zombie phase, the vampire phase in pop culture in the mid to late 2000s. Twilight, Vampire Diaries, all this other stuff. What was the one on HBO? True Blood. Big fad at that time. This came out during that, but I feel like this started picking up momentum because it started in 2003, and I feel like it kind of was starting to reach its zenith around the time of it getting picked up for the TV show. And it was kind of at the forefront of this new pop culture trend of zombies, where suddenly zombies got hot thanks to the Walking Dead TV show. But even before that, people kind of moved on from vampires and were looking for something else because, frankly, Twilight had made vampires not cool anymore. So they needed something else, and they found zombies, and this hit the sweet spot for them. And I think the other thing that helps, which is weird to say because this is such a gory and violent book, and it's literally every character just says shit in every other sentence seemingly. But I would argue that it was probably an easy book to pick up for teenagers and kids because the characterizations are very black and white, so to speak. It's like every character is very clearly defined based on the dialogue of I am this or I am that. You know who everybody is and why they act the way they do. And I think it gave people a chance to pick up a book where they didn't have to worry about continuity. They didn't have to worry about being lost. They could just pick it up, and it was, it's pretty simply written. So there's no danger of getting confused by anything that's going on here. It's all laid out for you. And I think there's something to be said for that. Maybe there is a place, particularly as a gateway comic, for a comic that is written much more straightforward than what we've come to expect from comics in the superhero genre, certainly, where it's, we kind of expect it to be wrapped up in mystery and all this stuff. And this is, pretty straightforward dialogue and characterizations. And also, I will say this, Rick is definitely, they go out of their way to make Rick the character in this book. And so if you start reading his story and you read the next issue, I can imagine you become invested in what becomes of Rick and what happens to Rick. So I almost feel more so than the TV show, which has become more of an ensemble. I think this book feels to me like it's the Rick Grimes story, basically.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess my main question was, so I understand the massive explosion in popularity of the book since the show started, but I guess I'm struggling to understand that little 6-year, I guess it was a 6-year window thereabouts, from 2003 to 2008 or 2009 when the show started. Like, how did we get from point A to point B? You know what I mean? How did it maintain that how did it build that popularity based on the quality of what we see here in this first trade?
How did it build momentum as Raw rolls on?
Exactly.
I think that it was filling a sweet spot because there wasn't anything like it. We talked about how great the premise is. There really wasn't anything like it on the stands at that time. I mean, Why the Last Man was coming out, which was kind of a post-apocalyptic deal, but it was much different than this, and much better. But that's neither here nor there. I think this filled a void. There wasn't really a zombie book on the shelves. There wasn't really a post-apocalyptic, story about people banding together and stuff like that. So I think that it filled a void at that time, and people latched onto it for whatever reason. Like it became something that people just had to read. And also, we can't discount, we haven't gotten far enough into it, but I have read a few volumes after this in the past, and Kirkman more so than almost anybody else, because he's dealing with original characters. This series has a reliance on the swerve.
The shock value. That's a good point. Because literally any character could die at any given moment.
Every character, except presumably Rick Grimes, is on the table to be killed at any time. And they do that. I mean, we see that in this volume where, for those of you who have seen the show, the Shane character arc is resolved in the span of these 6 issues, basically. Whereas on the show, it plays out over several seasons.
2 seasons.
And, better part of 2 seasons. Yeah, that's the end of season 2, you're right. But it plays out over 2 seasons. And here it's 6 issues, and there's no way to attach to Shane. There's no way to understand his motivations.
No, there is no gray to Shane's character. Like, in this book, he essentially, admits to Lori that he had wanted her for some time, and presumably was making a move now that Rick was out of the picture. You are never given an indication that he genuinely cares about Rick as a person, unlike the television show.
Yeah. Right, and there's just not much characterization there to do because it blows through it. But that's beside the point. The point being that you have these kind of simple characters and you're able to attach them. And I guess it filled a void in pop culture that was missing at that time, I suppose.
One thing the book also gives us is a discussion about Dale's seeming erectile dysfunction. So there's that.
Yes, his plumbing don't work the way it used to, which was pretty funny. Dale actually has a few funny lines in this one. He's different, much different from his television show counterpart. He's kind of just a
old redneck guy,
generic redneck guy, but he's got some really funny lines in this one. This is another cringe where I'm flipping through the book again. This is another for me cringe-worthy scene. Rick's conversation with the horse. Lord Almighty. Okay, if you show us him talking to the horse and just saying, "Okay, how you doing?" Trying to talk the horse down. He literally tells the horse what he's doing. Like, I'm going to Atlanta to see my wife and son. Have you ever been to Atlanta? It's not really that far away. Mind if I take this? It might come in handy. You ready, girl? Let's go. Slow down, girl. This is in the next panel. Let's go. And then suddenly, slow down, girl. Don't want to get you tired out. And then it's just people don't talk like this.
No, they don't.
Another example. This is a minor thing, Nick. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. People feel free to correct me on this. I have not known any person that I've talked to in real life that has referred to a C-section by its proper name of a cesarean section. And that's what Rick refers to it as, while again he's talking to the damn horse.
I have heard people say the word cesarean, so I can't I can't knock him too much for that one.
It struck me
what
as
I
odd.
don't often hear people do is make a public announcement of a marital disagreement, as Rick does when he is discussing giving Carl a gun, because he says out loud, "I know some of you, my wife included, object to this, but when I said everyone needs a gun, I meant everyone." And it's just, the dialogue is just borders on bad exposition at times. And not at times, most of the time, in my opinion.
Yeah. Also, Glenn says, "Come on, we must hurry."
I've never heard anyone say must.
Except in like an ironic manner, just Rick not understanding that having a duffel bag on will slow you down if you're trying to jump across a roof. So, I mean, there's just it hits you over the head repeatedly in a Captain Planet-like manner with whatever the plot is at the given time, like whether it's Rick and Lori disagreeing over Carl, whether it's Shane leering over Lori, whether it's Dale not being trusted by what's her name, Donna, because Donna thinks that Dale is having an incestuous three-way with Andrea and Amy in his RV, which given a scene that I have read in the second volume may be retroactively true. But everything is just laid out. It's like you can't just have Donna look at them and be untrusting of them. She has to say, I don't trust them having their three-way relationship.
It's unnatural.
It's unnatural.
And what about the awesome clothes washing scene that you called out off the air?
Oh, Lord. Refresh me on that again?
The clothes washing scene where in the course of 2 panels they have a debate over the role of the woman in the current society.
Oh, my God. They have a completely out of nowhere feminist debate as they're going down to wash clothes where Donna is like, how come we always have to wash the clothes and the men have to go hunt? To which Lori then corrects her and says, actually, we're just realism. There's no place for this kind of feminist talk here. We're being realists. We're going down to wash the clothes because that's what we need to do. And besides, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to go out there and have to shoot guns at those things.
Quite frankly, feminism was what my mother did. We're in the realism business.
Yeah, so I don't know what Kirkman was into at that time, but it was jarring to me. Like, it actually took me out, and I was like, first of all, again, people don't talk like this. And secondly, like, okay, I suppose I get what he's trying to do there in that, yes, you're trying to be practical, but it certainly felt to me like, I don't know, maybe I was reading too much into it. It felt like when an author is trying to preach a point in a book at the expense of whatever the book is about. So at the very least, it was an incredibly boring scene, and at the worst, it was a really obnoxious scene to put in there.
Yeah. So to wrap up, essentially in the course of 6 issues, they blow through Rick being shot, Rick in the coma, Rick waking up from the coma, Rick escaping the hospital, meeting Morgan, leaving Morgan, taking a car to Atlanta, his car breaking down, getting a horse, riding the horse into Atlanta, having the horse be attacked in the middle of the city, Glenn saving his ass, the reunion with the group, his the entirety of the Rick and Shane subplot, various characters eaten by zombies randomly one night while they're all sitting around a campfire talking. And, essentially they blow through what I would argue is like, I understand that the Herschel's Farm subplot took up a large portion of Season 2, but in terms of the character interactions, they pretty much blow through 2 seasons worth of character dynamics from the show in 6 issues. Which,
yeah,
again,
exactly.
maybe people who are fans of the book, maybe that's why they have an issue with seasons like Season 2, because they don't like how decompressed the storytelling is.
Yeah, and I was going to say that. I think for people that read the book first, some of them may resent the show because the book is so fast-paced and the show is not fast-paced. But I think for our tastes, we prefer that slower pace because we want to have more of a chance to deal with sort of the human interact. You and I, in other words, are less interested in them shooting zombies and more interested in the interpersonal relationships between these characters, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I agree.
Here's the line, by the way. I found the exact line that I was referring to from Lori. This isn't about women's rights. It's about being realistic and doing what needs to be done. To which Donna responds, whatever.
Yes.
Which was also my response after reading the scene. Yeah. There's also an exceedingly douchey scene. Maybe douchey's strong, but Carl is playing with Sophia, and Sophia says, "You think my daddy will come back too?" And Carl says, "Ain't your daddy dead?" And then she goes, "Yeah, but so was your daddy, and he came back." And then Carl says, "Well, my daddy was just sick. We had to leave him back in the hospital so he could get better. He wasn't dead." And then the girl says, "I miss my daddy," and it's sad. So just
that actually doesn't bug me too much because sometimes kids are kind of blunt. So I would say if any of all the dialogue in the first trade, that might actually be the most realistic dialogue.
That's probably fair. Yeah. We get Lori's overdramatic explanation of how she met Rick, and just I don't know. It's just not a. Whenever people are talking, it's just not interesting. This is a case of the book. In the book, it's actually the most interesting when they're killing the zombies.
Yes, and
when the zombies are attacking, because you're thinking, who's gonna die? Who's gonna, which for the most part, the deaths line up with what we saw on the show.
For the most part, Shane is killed a little bit. Just the speed of the deaths, the timing. The
speed of everything is quicker, right? Also, I would say we should get to this. were there any characters in the book that you liked more than you liked in the show?
Lori, obviously, would be the biggest one because she isn't a giant bitch in the book. She's mostly a woman who seems to love her husband and who made, one mistake and isn't constantly waffling back and forth.
I would say that might be the one that I like better. Glenn, I like Glenn a lot here, but he's good on the show too in the early seasons. And the other thing I was going to say is I thought maybe it's because he's the character that talks the least. Jim was really good in this. I enjoyed his arc quite a bit, actually. Or not his arc. He doesn't really have an arc. Nobody has an arc except Rick. But I enjoyed Jim's scenes in this because he doesn't say much, which is to the book's strengths. And his backstory is actually one of the most tragic when you hear about how his family met their demise once everything kind of fell apart. The other thing that you notice in this story is to use wrestling parlance, the characters they're trying to push at a given time. So Rick obviously is the main one because characters just constantly tell him how good he is at whatever he's doing and how nice he is and how they need to cater to what he wants and needs. But there's also you clearly get the sense that they're building Andrea up because they actually make a point of Shane and Rick talking about how good of a shot she is, how much better she is at shooting than everybody else that's in the group.
Yes, they have to blatantly state she's a better shot than anyone else.
Looks like we got a phenom on our hands, Rick. Try telling my wife how easy this is, Andrea. Not for her, it isn't. You just make it look easy. Just tremendous. But no, so all that being said, so I liked Jim a lot. You liked Lori better in the book, and Carl doesn't get to do much, but at least Carl isn't constantly running away.
Yes.
So there's that. Which brings us to the bottom line of this whole thing. Overall assessment and recommendation. I would have to say, honestly speaking, I can't recommend it.
No,
it's not for me. It's clearly for a lot of people,
yes.
But for the life of me, I just can't. And I've tried. I've read up to I think 4 volumes of the trades.
I read up
this.
At least through the prison storyline, and still.
Yeah, and I this of course was a reread for me, and I thought maybe I'll like it more now, but I just. The art's
and
beautiful.
What's crazy, Greg, is the first 2 issues, because I read it in single issue form digitally, and the first 2 issues I was liking it more because the first 2 issues don't have any dialogue in them for the most part.
Right, the only dialogue is Morgan and Rick.
And then
basically.
the dialogue started, and I remembered all the reasons I don't like the book.
I agree with that, and that's why I say I think the first issue was probably the strongest issue. Because there's not much dialogue, even though it blows by quickly, honestly, it's fine. It's a good issue. There's not much dialogue in it. But, man, I just can't get past it. I can't get past the way that Kirkman writes conversations, I guess you would say. It's, for people, anyway, a lot of people have complained about Brian Michael Bendis' dialogue. After reading this, look, yeah, he probably overloads it sometimes, but listen, Brian Michael Bendis on his worst day has never written dialogue like this. So I don't know about you, but I'm interested to see if this is a Robert Kirkman thing, and that's just how he writes, or if it's specific to The Walking Dead, and that's just how he writes The Walking Dead, because that's the big hang-up for me, is I just can't get past the dialogue.
Absolutely, yeah. The only Kirkman thing I've read other than this, because you haven't read Invincible, I haven't read Invincible, is he did a run on Ultimate X-Men that I read, and it was okay, but I don't remember the dialogue being this stilted and this overly expository. So, and I don't know.
In a related note, I'll also say that some of my least favorite episodes of the show are ones that were written by Kirkman. So. I don't know. Maybe he's just not my kind of writer. I like his ideas. I like his plots. I mean, and even his character. Rick is a good character. There's good characters to be found here. You just don't get enough substance to them to be able to sink into them. So I would, I can't recommend this. I don't know about you, Nick. What are your thoughts on it?
No, I can't. I mean, at least, using my own taste. This is not for me. It's clearly for somebody else, but I will say that if you enjoy black and white comic book art, that kind of style, then it's at least worth checking out from that standpoint. And if you're somebody who is frustrated by the show's glacial pace, like if you used to be a fan of the show and you got tired of how long they would stretch things out, perhaps you could try this. Perhaps this is more your speed. I don't know. But
there's also the chance that the book gets significantly better later on. I don't know. I haven't.
There is, but like I said, I think I've read the first 40 issues or so, and it really didn't, in my opinion. Now, granted, that's been a few years since I've read that far, but this most recent reread did nothing to change my mind on that front. So, I mean, for those of you out there who are big fans of this book, I'm glad you enjoy it. But for Greg and I, it's just I don't get it. I mean, I feel like I need a box over it explaining what the appeal of it is.
Even if that box is already there. But yeah, no, and we still, and to show you the how this works, we still consider ourselves Walking Dead fans. We're just not fans of the book.
Because we both love the show. I mean, for the most part, love the show, and we both love the Telltale video game.
The what game? Come on. Come on and say it, Nick. Nick? You gonna say it? You gonna say it for us?
I've already said it.
Say it again. Come on, I just want to hear it.
I'm not gonna do it.
Oh.
Quite frankly.
I think that there's a lot of people out there right now that are disappointed they're not going to get to hear that one more time. But
And by a lot of people, I think you mean about 3.
Right. That's correct. Our normal listenership.
For the purposes of our show, though, 3 is a lot of people. That's
true. 3 is enough. 3 is company too, by the way.
There you go.
So in any event, we do like the game from Telltale Studios. We also love the show, and so we consider ourselves fans of it. But we definitely are not fans of the book. But we appreciate those who are. There's a lot of people out there that are big fans of it. With that being said, that brings us to the end of another Longbook Hunt. We hope you've enjoyed the ride, and hopefully we've made you chuckle a time or two. Admittedly, I didn't get to say Coral, and I didn't get to do my Herschel impression.
Well, if you had read the second volume like you were supposed to, you would have gotten to do your Herschel impression.
I know, and I just couldn't get in. I couldn't imagine my disappointment when I ran out of time and couldn't read it. I didn't even get to say Glean. But no, so that brings us to the end of that. We have one more episode left in Walking Dead month, folks, and this might be the big one. Next week, we are going to have an exclusive review of the season premiere episode, the season 7 premiere of The Walking Dead, which promises to answer the question, who did Negan kill? So, should be an interesting one. And from what our friend Jenny told us last week on the show, it sounds like Negan is going to be a character that is going to provide us some entertainment value. Wouldn't you say, Nick?
Absolutely. It certainly seems that way. And, just to go ahead and warn you now, next week's episode will be spoiler-filled. It's going to be a full-on spoiler discussion of the premiere episode. It will be a full-length discussion. It will take up, essentially half of our episode next week. So if you do not get to watch the episode before the show is put up, just skip on by, for that.
What we'll try to do and put it in the Place to Be Nation Facebook group whenever we share it. We'll try to get up a timestamp of when the break is in the show, because we're going to front load the show with this review. We're going to lead off with our review of The Walking Dead, and then we're going to put our reading and watching and our rundown at the end of the episode. This will give us a chance, theoretically, to put in a timestamp for when the break is. So if you need to skip all the spoilers but you want to hear the other stuff, you can skip through that and listen to the back end of the show and get the normal reading, watching, rundown, and all of our various shenanigans. But we're looking forward to this. It should be a very interesting premiere. Lots of people are going to be watching it. We're sure to have strong opinions about it one way or the other. So be sure to be on the lookout for that. And then as we enter the month of November, things are back to normal for a little while. We go back to our normal routine. We're going to have, we're going to have an off the page on Doctor Strange, the animated movie from Marvel. We're going to have Russell Sellers joining us to look at the often forgotten movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, The Incredible Hulk. We're going to have just a litany of shows. We got the great Ben Morris will be joining us to talk Marvel video games in a countdown. If all goes according to plan, we actually also are going to be finally grabbing some low-hanging fruit that has dangled in front of us since, well, what would you say, 2013 when we first started our column.
When we started doing the column, we joked about, one day we'll have to, give in to the urge to do a long book hunt on the Longbow Hunters, and we are finally we're gonna reach for that low-hanging fruit, as Greg so eloquently put it.
Yep, the Longbook Hunters will take on the Longbow Hunters. So,
and not, and all of those shows in November are certainly going to be of a high quality, and we're looking forward to bringing those to you. But
they're not going to be the largest podcast ever.
You go ahead. I can't. Oh.
That's right, folks. In December, in the month of December, Christmas time will be here. Hanukkah will be here. Kwanzaa will be here. All of these great things will be here. And you'll also get the largest podcast ever from the Hard-Traveling Fanboys. Because we are going to present, I don't even want to reveal it yet. We're going to present to you an off the page that we believe could break the internet. And off the page, where we will have a special guest on, and the three of us will look at a property that I would argue
there is a 0% chance that anybody outside of a selection of 5 people has ever actually seen this.
One could argue whether anyone should have ever seen it.
One could argue whether it should have ever been made.
Or one could argue that perhaps it should have been given more attention. And that's what we'll try to get to the bottom of when we bring to you the largest podcast ever from the Hard-Traveling Fanboys. And we can't wait for this. This is, Nick, I don't know about you, but this is probably the most excited I've ever been for a podcast.
Yeah, my laughter notwithstanding, I want to ensure you that laughter is genuine, because when Greg and I first came up with the idea to do this, it was essentially just both of us laughing on the phone for about 2 minutes uninterrupted. So I don't know how much in-depth, intelligent discussion will be on that episode, but it'll be a hell of a lot of fun to record. And again, Greg doesn't want to give too much away, but I will say we're going to be delving into the oft-maligned genre of YouTube fan films, and a particular fan film that Greg and myself and various friends of ours discovered during our time at Troy University. And we will tell you more about that in the coming weeks and kind of build to it and make sure that the links to watch that glorious fan film are in everyone's hands so that you can follow along with us whenever that fateful edition of Off the Page finally arrives.
And we certainly hope that you, or at least someone like you, will listen to the show. A show that will no doubt leave you saying, wowzers.
Oh, a show that won't be ugly. Not ugly.
It'll be
very, very beautiful.
Oh, Lord Almighty. I can't wait. Can we just skip to December, Nick? Can we just forget about the whole month of November and just move right into December? I can't wait.
Now, like I said, we've got some good episodes, some good stuff coming up in November.
That's true. We got some good stuff coming up.
And besides, Greg, you have to remember, you can't just start with the main event. You got to have the undercard. You got to build. Build to it.
That's right.
And that's what we're gonna be doing here over the next few weeks.
Can't wait for that, and this is just a sampling of the kind of content that you can expect from the longest running weekly episodic comic book podcast in Place to Be Nation pop history. That's right. Now, again, I know I shilled him earlier in the show. There's brand new episodes up of Geek and Sassy right now. Go check it out. Seller's Points will be dropping in the very near future, if it hasn't by the time this comes out. Go check them out. We're trying to bring you the best in comic book entertainment. Place to Be Nation Pop, we've got a steady stream of content here. We're all helping each other out. Jenny from Geek and Sassy was on here last week. Russell's going to be on here soon. I'm going to be on Russell's podcast soon. We're all intermingling here. So check us out. We try to entertain, and drop us some suggestions. Come to our Facebook page, facebook.com, Place to Be Nation Comics.
Or bitch at us for not enjoying the Walking Dead comic book.
Absolutely. Send us bitch at us for not having the right lists last week. Bitch at us for not liking the Walking Dead comics, for being idiots that don't appreciate the comic book form. Just lay into us. We welcome that. Or maybe we touched a nerve and you've finally been waiting for somebody to call out the Walking Dead's dialogue. Let us know that too. Give us suggestions for how you'd like the show to change. We've shown in the past we make alterations based on suggestions. So let us know what you want to hear, and we will do it. Other than that, I mean, the only thing I have left to really talk about here before we sign off this week is I did promise a fantasy football update, which is everyone's favorite part of the show. Certainly mine this season, because I have won 3 in a row now. I have climbed out of the cellar. I was 0-3, and now I'm 3-3. I am riding a wave of momentum, ladies and gentlemen.
Absolutely.
Behind the golden arm of Matt Ryan, of all people. Matt Ryan, leading me to greatness. And meanwhile, there's another team in this league sitting here at number 11 out of 12. And this is a little team based out of a Satan compound that I may have frequented in the past. And this team is known as the Hilton Hulkamaniacs.
Indeed.
And I don't know who their general manager might be, but man, he looks like he could use a little work right now.
Well, quite frankly,
he's struggling.
Greg,
1-5, ladies and gentlemen.
Greg Phillips. What have I always told you?
Behind the bronze arm of Ryan Tannehill.
What have I always told you, Greg?
Oh.
Yeah, a few struggles right now, but, Greg, what have I always told you about fantasy football, and it's something that you would do well to remember right now. So, go ahead. Tell the people.
It's not a marathon. Or, I'm sorry, it's not a sprint.
No, you can't even get that right.
Marathon.
That's right. So, enjoy your gloating now. The season is young. Now that your favorite quarterback and mine, Tom Brady, is back, I feel that will portend a turnaround of my fortunes now that Rob Gronkowski will actually be getting catches and targets throughout the game.
You mean Mojo Rawley's best friend, Rob Gronkowski.
Indeed.
With all that being said, folks, we hope that you've enjoyed the show. We hope you tune in next week. Give us some feedback. We'll catch you down the line.
In the morning dew, I braided twigs of willow, made a string of buckeye beads. But flesh and blood needs flesh and blood, and you're the one I need. Flesh and blood needs flesh and blood, and you're the one I need. I leaned against the bark of birch, and I breathed the honeydew. I saw a northbound flock of geese against a sky of baby blue. Beside the lily pads, I carved a whistle from a reed. Mother Nature's quite a lady, but you're the one I need. Flesh and blood needs flesh and blood, and you're the one I need. The cardinal sang just for me, and I thanked him for the song. Then the sun went slowly down the west, and I had to move along. These were some of the things on which my mind and spirit feed. But flesh and blood needs flesh and blood, and you're the one I need. Flesh and blood needs flesh and blood, and you're the one I need. So when the day was ended, I was still not satisfied, for I knew everything I touched would wither and would die. And love is all that will remain and grow from all these seed. Mother Nature's quite a lady, but you're the one I need. Flesh and blood needs flesh and blood, and you're the one I need.